Fantastic. Well, actually, let me check the time. All right. Yeah, it's okay. It's 3 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order and call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Delegate Keene.
Present.
Delegate Converse-Fowler.
Present.
Delegate Askew.
Present.
Delegate Hodges. I believe I saw Delegate Hodges.
Yeah.
There you are. Pardon me. Delegate Ranson.
Here.
Senator Kiggins.
Here.
Senator Locke. Senator Lewis.
Here.
Councilwoman McClellan.
Here.
Chris Stone.
Here.
And Delegate Bouchard. All right. Of course, Chairman Lewis. Pardon me.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, pardon me. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, folks, so obviously I'm having some technology issues and joining by phone is a little problematic, so I'm going to stick with it as long as I can. But in any event, just apologize for that. Since I had some issues here over the weekend with the computer. So, and believe it or not, there's only one computer in this office that has a camera on it. So we've got a robust agenda here today. The first item before us is the election of the vice chair. So we'll open that up for nominations and or discussions.
Mr. Chairman, this is Keith.
Yeah.
Question for you, or parliamentary inquiry, I guess. We had nominations at the last meeting. Do we need to re-entertain those, or is those motions still before us?
I did not recall that. Do we have nominations open before us?
We had nominations.
I'm going to have to defer.
We had nominations and votes before with a tie. So did that kill that, or do we have to renominate, I guess? Or
I would suspect we'd be best off to renominate.
Mr. Chair, this is Delegate Askew.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Delegate Converse-Fowler for vice chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yep. Is that Mark?
You're not on the screen. This is Delegate Mark Heem. I would second that motion and speak to that motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if you remember last meeting, whenever it was when we last convened on this topic, the issue of the nomination came up, and there were nominations that were made. To Delegate Hodges' point, I believe the nominations were unfortunately tied because we just hadn't had a chance to really have a discussion among us. And because it failed and there was not a reconsideration motion, where that motion pretty much failed. So I think this is a new motion which should be nominated. And I know that Delegate Hodges has done excellent work in the past, and he and I have been part of this committee for a long time. And the question I had, the reason why I had abstained last time was because I wasn't sure whether we had any kind of a formal protocol or policy as to whether we needed to have members of different political parties being in leadership. And I clarified that that's not a rule that we have to follow. And given where we are with the issues and wanting to have some new voices, and I know Delegate Fowler has been participating in this committee since even before she was a member. She came to a lot of our meetings, and she's done an excellent job in shepherding this issue in the committee. I'd be happy to second that motion to nominate her.
All right, are there any other nominations?
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Ranson.
Yeah, is that Margaret?
Yeah.
Hey, Margaret.
Hey, I'd like to nominate Keith Hodges, Delegate Hodges, please.
Okay.
Speak to that motion.
Sure, shoot.
I think it's first and foremost, it's important that we have a person in the rural area closer, to the north that can offer a different perspective on the flooding issue for the rural community. He also authored the bill and put in the piece of legislation in the House side. He has historical perspective on this legislation. And I think that it's important that we continue on the path that we've been on I just came onto this committee, and I know he's been here for a while. So I think that it's important that we have his experience as we continue to move forward, possibly and hopefully receiving funding on this commission. So with that, I'd like to propose that he be vice chair.
Okay. Is there a second? No second? All right. Then we've only got one nomination in front of us then. I guess we go ahead and we need a vote. I guess so.
Yes, that would be a roll call vote. Mr. Chair, we're calling the vote for Delegate Conversfowler for vice chair. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Delegate Keem.
Aye.
Delegate Conversfowler.
Aye.
Delegate Askew.
Aye.
Delegate Hodges.
No.
Delegate Ranson.
No.
Senator Kiggins.
Aye.
Senator Locke. Senator Locke once more. Sorry, I didn't.
Oh, I was trying to unmute myself. Aye.
Councilwoman McClellan.
Aye.
Chris Stone.
Aye.
And Joseph Bouchard.
Aye.
Senator Lewis.
Aye.
That's 9 yeas and 1 no.
All right. Delegate Conversfowler, you're the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope to.
You want to say anything?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope to support the committee in any way I can and look to be a resource. So I look forward to our work. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. First up, we've got Rear Admiral Ann Phillips. Ann, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to talk with you this afternoon. I do not have slides. I was asked by Chairman Lewis to give you an update on the first meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee, which, as you are all aware, was a key outcome of the October 22 released Coastal Resilience Framework, Master Plan Framework for the Commonwealth of Virginia. The first Technical Advisory Committee met on the afternoon of the 14th of December. It was a public meeting. We had participation from 26 appointed members and or their specified designees, and in addition 12 invited members who provide additional technical expertise to that body that we think we will need to move forward. Again, as it was a public meeting, that we had over 100 total participants in attendance. The meeting agenda really consisted of introducing the members of the Technical Advisory Committee to each other. Some of them do not know each other. A framework review presentation that was given by Secretary Matthew J. Strickler, very similar to the presentation that you all saw when he presented to you a month or so ago on the framework. And we specifically focused on the responsibilities of the Technical Advisory Committee as they relate to that framework, specifically developing a prioritization process, collecting projects that are already ready to go and may be eligible to be prioritized, and other work that should be included in the context of developing a master plan for the Commonwealth of Virginia, developing a financing and funding strategy, tracking scientific developments and recommending additional scientific and data requirements and studies that could be conducted or that will be needed, aligning economic development initiatives, and strengthening partnerships with federal installations, as well as developing a full and open public planning process and outreach strategy that will allow facilitation and interaction between the communities and the planning process over time. So those were the 6 key responsibilities charged to the TAC. In addition, We received updates from the Department of Emergency Management, the Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Department of Environmental Quality, and the Virginia Coastal Zone Management Program on grants and or legislative outcomes and direction from the previous General Assembly in 2020 that they are working on related to coastal adaptation and protection. We also, I presented an update on a request for proposal that the Commonwealth released on December 1st, requesting technical assistance and engineering assistance to help us develop a master plan and process for the Commonwealth. That RFP will close on the 30th of December. We have put together an evaluation committee for that effort, which consists of members of urban and rural planning districts, 3 coastal communities, localities who have already done this kind of work, academic representation from the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, Virginia Tech, and Old Dominion University, as well as a representation from the Office of the Governor and the Coastal Zone Management Program. So once proposals are received and validated by the Department of General Services, that group will come together and begin the process of evaluating the request for proposals and moving forward from there. Subsequent to the first meeting, we last Friday released an email at the request of, or to all of the TAC members in total, including some recommendations that had already been made by them to further evaluate how we will divide the TAC into subcommittees. So we proposed 7 subcommittees for the TAC: project identification, project evaluation, finance, community outreach, studies, research, and best practices, federal installation partnerships, and aligning economic development. Again, those are proposals, and we've asked the TAC membership to give us additional guidance and also tell us which of those they are interested in serving on, and if they are interested in chairing a subcommittee. And for the next meeting, which we anticipate will be mid-February, we expect to include on the agenda a presentation from the selected offerer. We should have that process concluded by then. Discussion of how the offerer and the technical advisory committee will interact, and the timeline for deliverables from both parties. An additional update, we anticipate an additional update on the Community Flood Preparedness Fund guidelines. As you are aware, they are out through public comment through the end of January. And then if we can get to this point, preliminary overviews or at least comments from those subcommittees as we have formed them. So that's where we are with the Technical Advisory Committee, moving along quickly. And I think the next key milestone for them, once we get back from the holiday season and we start to collect more and more information from members as to which committees they would like to participate in, and start working through either volunteers or requesting people accept a chairmanship of a committee. The next big milestone will be the decision on who our contracting support will be, and then how that process will move forward aligned with the Technical Advisory Committee's work. Subject to your questions, Mr. Chairman, that's my discussion for today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Rarema Phillips? You must have covered the waterfront, Ann.
Thank you, sir.
No questions? All right, we'll move on then. Next, we have Justin Williams, DEQ presentation, Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act amendments on sea level rise. Justin?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Justin Williams from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. Today, I'm going to provide an overview of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area Designation and Management Regulations Climate Adaptation Amendment. This is a proposed amendment to 9 VAC 25830. I'm the Director of the Office of Watersheds and Local Government Assistance Programs at DEQ. Just in terms of a background, the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act was amended in this past General Assembly. It did so by changing 62.1, 44.1572, which is the provisions for the State Water Control Board to develop criteria to be utilized by local governments. Specifically, it added criteria for local government programs to encourage and promote coastal resilience and adaptation to sea level rise and climate change. Additionally, there was an enactment clause that was provided in the legislation that provided that the State Water Control Board shall adopt regulations to implement the provisions of this act. that the initial adoption of such regulation shall be exempt from the requirements of Article 2 of Chapter 40 of Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, which is the Administrative Process Act, and that such proposed regulations shall be subject to a public comment period of at least 60 days prior to final adoption by the State Water Control Board. Although the enactment clause included provisions that there would not be a typical notice of intended regulatory action and regulatory advisory panel, we did still engage in stakeholder discussions. We talked with other agencies that are doing work in the coastal adaptation arena. This included the Department of Conservation and Recreation, the Virginia Department of Health, Virginia Department of Transportation, Virginia Marine Institute, the Virginia Marine Resources Commission, and the William and Mary Coastal Policy Center. We also held one-on-one discussions with stakeholders throughout the localities and areas subject to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, which are the 84 localities that are identified in the statute as being in the Tidewater area. Those discussions included the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, the Northern Regional Commission, the City of Norfolk, the City of Hampton, and other stakeholders, including James River Association, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Wetlands Watch. We also held a public stakeholder input discussion on October 29th, 2020, that was open to the public and stakeholders interested in the process to solicit information and feedback, and that was attended by approximately 150 people. Concurrent with this activity and prior to the legislation, we had secured funding through a NOAA grant to actually be able to engage the William and Mary Coastal Policy Center and VIMS to assist us with technical guidance and development and training to work in the arena of climate adaptation within the framework of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act and the regulations. Just in terms of an overview, for familiarity with Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act and the current criteria and regulations, under those regulations, there are provisions providing for both general and specific criteria. General criteria apply throughout Chesapeake Bay preservation areas, which include both resource protection areas and resource management areas, as well as specific criteria that apply within what is identified as a resource protection area. This diagram here, for illustration purposes, shows the RMA and RPA, primarily focusing on that the RPA is the tidal feature itself, as well as a 100-foot buffer, and the RMA is those areas which have drainage into the RPA. There's also a recognition of certain areas known as intensely developed areas, and these are areas that had historical development and have been designated by localities in accordance with those regulations. Under this regulatory amendment that, as proposed, we created a new subsection, 9 VAC 25.830.155. Overall, we attempted to provide for both inclusion of consideration of impacts into land development review, as well as to allow for adaptation measures, particularly within the resource protection area. Outline criteria consistent with the approach that currently exists under the regulatory provisions for other criteria requirements, to focus primarily on consideration and measures within the resource protection areas, particularly since this is both where you would see the largest impact from sea level rise and need to take coastal climate change adaptation measures, and provide a framework recognizing that sites and tools that may be utilized by localities or applied would be varied and potentially specific to certain site conditions. Under those individual provisions, under 9 VAC 2830.155A, we just lay out that this establishes provisions in addition to the general and RPA performance criteria previously mentioned, identify language consistent with the statutory authority and regulatory provisions that the criteria should be adopted into local ordinances and programs. This is the requirement for all of the criteria that's adopted or identified under the regulations for the local governments to implement, and that's done through local ordinances and implementation of the program. We did provide a 3-year time frame for incorporation upon adoption, with the goal of allowing sufficient time for both the guidance development and training necessary in light of new regulations, as well as the process for localities to undertake ordinance revisions. Under 9 VAC 830.155, we wanted to specifically recognize the allowance of adaptation measures in CBPA areas. Under the current regulations, there are different activities, particularly as it relates to the resource protection area, as to what is allowed. So we wanted to ensure recognition of this specific allowance of adaptation measure. We also wanted to clarify that while we intended to provide a framework, certainly localities, as they look at their resiliency and climate adaptation activities and requirements, that it was not intended to limit localities' abilities to otherwise address or take actions consistent with the requirements or policies in response to climate change impacts. The next provision, 9 VAC 283155C, was designed to provide for the consideration of climate change impacts and activities within the resource protection area specifically, and really there for localities to utilize their model or forecast in the review of site plans for activities within the resource protection area, using a 30-year projection and use or incorporating the most updated 2017 NOAA intermediate high scenario projection curve. Use of that curve was consistent with other activities by the Commonwealth, including the Executive Order 45, as well as activities that's otherwise been undertaken by agencies such as VDOT. It also provides for localities to examine the impacts on projects on water quality protections in light of the forecast, and of course, enable them to include measures, conditions, or alterations in light of those identified potential impacts. I wanted to just provide an example of application. So the NOAA 2017 NOAA Intermediate High Projection Curve is actually available online. You can enter in a specific address and be able to both identify the intermediate high curve as well as a period of time. This address that was utilized is the address for DEQ's headquarters. Another important aspect of this work is that this intermediate high projection curve is currently being incorporated into ADAPT Virginia, which is another tool frequently used by localities and others to forecast impacts or activities, and will allow for the opportunity again for the specification of a specific date and application once incorporated of that intermediate high scenario curve. The next provision, 9 VAC 283155D, does provide for exception limitations for exceptions that a locality are allowed to make to the general or specific criteria. Those specific limitations are limited to ensuring that there is consideration of climate change impacts, limiting the allowance for an exception or recognition of solely using fill in projects, and allowing or limiting an exception for development in the seaward 50-foot buffer, except for activities that are already recognized to be allowed, and for, of course, incorporating adaptation measures. The last provisions deal with specifically the criteria for allowance of climate adaptation measures in the resource protection area, where again, we recognize most of this activity would be necessary to occur to address climate change impacts and install adaptation measures. That criteria was outlined and designed to be consistent with existing criteria approach to recognize distinction between current site conditions. This includes both sites that are currently vegetated and undeveloped versus those that are developed, and to attempt to be consistent with program policy, emphasizing the use and preservation of vegetation and adaptation measures that are used, and specifically recognizing consistent with other provisions in the reg and in the statute, the design to incorporate or address vegetation as a buffer measure for protection of the RPA, and require compliance with best management practices and other applicable requirements as well. Specifically, we also included provisions to provide relief from water quality impact assessments. Those are assessments that are required when there are activities within the resource protection area designed to look at the potential offset or change in water quality protection, and did so for those activities that both serve a dual purpose of adaptation and water quality protection, so that they're designed to serve both purposes, specifically, for example, non-point source pollution program BMPs. We also included a provision to encourage living shorelines, given the activity and work that's being done to both promote and incorporate living shorelines as an adaptation measure, recognizing that there is, of course, jurisdictional overlap between the CBVA program and other permitting requirements, as well as to try to reduce the review that's required for living shoreline projects consistent with their promotion or encouragement. The proposed regulations were presented to the State Water Control Board last week. The State Water Control Board did act. Specifically, their action was to authorize the proposed regulations for public comment, to direct a 90-day public comment period, and to direct at least one meeting with stakeholders to be held at the end of the General Assembly session, and for there to be final consideration by the board at the June meeting. So that concludes my overview and presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, I think Senator Lewis is trying to get back into the Zoom. So did anybody have any questions?
Delegate Converse Fowler, Vice Chair, this is Andrea. I have a question.
Yes, Councilwoman McClellan.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, I have a question. I'm glad you're taking into consideration those future title projections. As we've done locally at Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, we're expecting sea level rise of 1.5 feet by 2050, 3 feet by 2080, et cetera. Would that then change, and how would that change that RPA and that RMA zone? Would that also move as a result of that? And what is the process for moving that? Does that make sense?
Yes. So the RPA and RMA, each locality is required to have a Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area map. And actually, when there is then activity done within an RPA specifically, a site-specific resource protection delineation is required. That is static as of the point of that delineation. The goal here with the model or forecast is for application of that forecast to see what potential shifting there could be with that RPA, and then make adjustments accordingly as necessary by the locality with alterations or conditions in the plan. So it's not necessarily shifting the RPA of the day, but it's recognizing that impact and incorporating that into any of the site plan.
So just to confirm, then it is the responsibility of the locality to make any adjustments based on future sea level rise and those designations.
That right, with the intention being that looking at those forecasts specifically with a site plan, they can incorporate that into that plan review.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Madam Chair, this is Keith.
Delegate Hodges.
Hello there. Thank you, Justin, for that update. And I'd just like to say it's very thorough, and it's about time that we've started to move in this direction. A number of these things we've tried to address in past years, and I think you've done an excellent job, at least, giving us an overview. Covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Prior to the release of those regs, is it possible for us to take a look at those at some point prior to that public comment period?
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to share with the chairman and the committee a copy of the proposed regulations as they were authorized by the State Water Control Board.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the briefing.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if Senator Lewis has come back. He said he would text me if he did. So we'll go ahead to, we have Mr. Crum, Bob Crum. He's on here to give us a briefing from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chairman, subcommittee members, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today to share with you some of the regional legislative priorities that have been approved by the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission Board. I believe that the senator's staff had provided everyone on Friday a little bit of read-ahead material. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can go ahead and use that, share a screen. Everybody should be able to see that if that worked out okay. Very good. So what I'd like to do is share with you our legislative priorities adopted by the PDC that touch on the issue of coastal resiliency. Before we do that, just a quick reminder, the HRPDC represents the 17 local governments within the Hampton Roads region. As you can imagine, coastal resiliency, sea level rise is a very important priority for our work program. We're very pleased that our current chair, of course, is Council Member Andrea McClellan, a member of this subcommittee, was vice chair of the PDC last year and is now our chair. She is joined by Newport News City Council Member David Jenkins as our vice chair. We have a 47-member board that contains representatives of those 17 local governments. Because this is such a critical priority for us, we have a couple of committees that have worked very hard on this issue. Ms. McClellan is our chairs a subcommittee of local elected officials that's been appointed by the PDC that helped us work up many of these ideas that I'm going to share with you today as our regional legislative priorities. We also have a technical committee of staff that meet monthly to deal with these issues as well. So it's from those committees that these priorities were developed. And we're very pleased that our board unanimously approved the legislative priorities that I'm going to review with you today. So let's go ahead and get started. We have 4 priorities we'd like to discuss today around coastal resiliency that have been approved by our board. The first is asking that the General Assembly consider the creation of a Virginia Commonwealth Flooding Board. And if I may pause a second and just provide you a little bit of information. As our subcommittee members and PDC thought about this, that they looked around and said, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, or our CTB, is really a great model for what we're requesting here. As you're all aware, the CTB contains representatives from every region within the Commonwealth. They meet on a regular basis. They pull in to their meetings all of the state agencies that are working to address the issue of transportation. And they've had a great deal of success collaborating to try to advance how we fund things, where we fund things, what those priorities are. We think that the issue of coastal resiliency, but more importantly, flooding, would benefit by this type of an approach. Our subcommittee members really believes that flooding is a statewide issue. And while here in Hampton Roads, it comes from coastal impacts and other things, we're aware in other parts of the state it's riverine flooding, or it's flooding that's being experienced from heavy rainfalls. That our entire state is dealing with this challenge of flooding, and some of those flooding events getting more severe and more pronounced and more frequent. So to be able to bring the statewide approach, looking forward, to be able to bring the statewide approach around solving problems relating to this flooding issue, our commission believes that the creation of this Virginia Commonwealth Flooding Board would help bring together all the state agencies, all the regional partners around one table to have a conversation about flood mitigation approaches, to ensure collaboration and alignment among various state agencies and their regional partners, and really perform the same role as our Commonwealth Transportation Board, but to do that around flooding. We would see this board meeting on a regular basis and really taking a leadership role in developing prioritization approaches for how we would prioritize funding efforts for some of the new funding that's going to become available to the Commonwealth of Virginia to address this issue. So that's the first item that we look forward to discussing with you today. The second item I'd like to touch on is resilience consideration for the Smart Scale Funding Program. Here in Hampton Roads, what we found out is that if you deal with the current Smart Scale program, and of course, Smart Scale is the Commonwealth of Virginia's primary method for prioritizing transportation projects for state funding. But if you incorporate resiliency issues into your transportation project, it's going to be more expensive. And the way the Smart Scale process is set up is the higher your cost, the less competitive you're going to be. And there's reasons for that. It's a very competitive program with not enough money in it. But our elected officials strongly believe that if a locality is going to be proactive and raise the proposed surface of a road or do other things to make it more resilient, they don't want to see those projects penalized in the Smart Scale process. I'm very pleased to know that Virginia Beach as a city endorsed this as a legislative priority as well. And I know that there's legislation that has been introduced on this particular item. So we look forward to discussing that with you. But we really think having resilience issues incorporated into the Smart Scale program would be a very, very important step. The next item is we'd like to ask that Virginia's residential property disclosure requirements be amended to provide disclosure about a property's vulnerability to flooding or any history of flood damage or flood insurance claims. Ms. McClellan, I'm struck by one of our subcommittee members who's a mayor who said, if you can get a Carfax report and find out if the car you're about to purchase is flooded, that we should be able to provide the same type of information if someone is looking to purchase property. Currently, there's no requirement for disclosure regarding a property's past flooding history. And many times, and Ms. McClellan can talk about this a little bit with her constituents, but many times buyers don't know that these issues of previous flooding occurred until they're required to purchase flood insurance policies as part of their mortgage agreements. I know that this is an item that's been discussed before. We recognize that it's going to take a lot of collaboration. We're very pleased that we're at the table with the Virginia Association of Realtors. Ms. McClellan, myself, and others had a great session with them just last week. We don't have it all figured out yet, but we're getting there, and I think there's a common interest to try to get to a good place on this. And Delegate Converse-Fowler, I know this is an area you've looked at closely in the past, and look forward to your input on this issue. And then the final item I want to discuss, and you can see all of our legislative priorities in our little brochure here, but this is good news. We made an ask for state and federal assistance to update precipitation predictions. And before I go any further, I want to say and thank Rear Admiral Ann Phillips, because through some of her work in amending the Chesapeake Bay program contract, we've taken a huge step to already address this legislative priority. But first, I'd like to describe for you the problem. Historically, stormwater infrastructure that collects and diverts rainwater away from our roads and buildings is typically sized based on historical rainfall events. And there was something called Atlas 14, which is prepared by the National Weather Service. And as you can imagine, it hasn't been updated since 2006. So that's what we're using to design our stormwater facilities based on those rainfall trend lines. And as you can imagine, the storms are getting more frequent, they're getting stronger. Just to give you one example, the city of Virginia Beach, based on studies that they did, they adopted Atlas 14 plus a 20% increase because their work with Dewberry and others found that they're under designing by about 20%. So we wanted to ask that the state and the federal representatives help us to ensure that Atlas 14 is updated. So Rear Admiral Phillips has been able to expand that Chesapeake Bay program contract to evaluate rainfall data for the entire state. That's going to be a huge, huge help. What will remain after that work is completed then is we want to be certain that we establish state policy to support those design standards, and really hope that the state and that the subcommittee can play a role in setting up a process by where all the stakeholders that would be able to provide good input into this can help you form good policy around that technical rainfall data analysis. So this is a huge step. Rear Admiral Phillips, if you're still on, thank you very much for that work, but we're really excited to see that being updated for us. Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chairman, if I may I ask my chair, Councilmember Andrew McClellan, if she had any additional comments to add to my introduction here?
Absolutely. I think Senator Lewis is trying to, it is on, but I think I think that would be fine.
Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, can you all hear me? Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Am I back on?
Yeah,
okay.
You're there. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Hi, Senator Lewis.
Councilwoman McClellan, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. No, Bob, I think you did a great job. Without a doubt, flooding is one of the biggest issues facing our region. And I know that's why many of us are here on this, joining together on this effort. And we've put together a pretty big package of requests. We hope that we can continue to see some traction here. Really excited about the idea of a Commonwealth Flood Board, which would incorporate many things, including the soon-to-be auction proceeds from the regional greenhouse gas initiatives, but other federal funding sources that we anticipate and hope and will need in the future for sure. And then also to Bob's point, we had a very productive meeting with the Virginia Association of Realtors last week, and it was great to have folks at the table. And we made some real progress, I thought, Bob. And I think we have some opportunity to do some good stuff moving forward. So that's all I have.
Great. Any questions of Bob or Councilwoman McClellan?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this is Keith.
I've got. Yeah, well, go ahead. Go ahead, Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this, the creation of the board, you're going to have the creation of the board and the costs associated with that, then whatever dollars you can use to move forward with projects. What are you looking at as far as a fiscal impact? Have you put that together? Because there's definitely going to be a pretty, I would think, a sizable fiscal impact with this.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for that question. We have done a white paper on the Commonwealth Flooding Board where we've outlined a potential financial impact. I would be happy to share that as follow-up information with this subcommittee, sir. And then if you would have any question about that, we could discuss more, but I will follow up immediately with that, sir, so that you have that information. We think that with the RGGI funding, there would be an opportunity, though, to be able to set up the organizational infrastructure around this. And what our hope is that we would see ROI on this in the short term through alignment and possible cost savings would be our goal. But I'll be happy to share that white paper with everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just Bob, just to tack on there. So recognizing that I believe there's a 5% of the RGGI funds that are supposed to go for administration of the funding as it relates to the flooding board. So approximately $5 million a year. I don't think that we're thinking this would cost anything near that, but I think Delegate Hodges, you make a great point that there would be an expense here. Again, though, recognizing what a huge impact flooding is having to all of our communities and the need to elevate this and to put the appropriate staff behind it. Now is the time to do that. At least that's how we feel from the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So hopefully we'll get some support from you and your colleagues.
And if I might, what do you envision happening with the current structure of the fund? I mean, is the board going to take over the administration of the fund, or just act in advisory approval capacity, or how do you all envision that?
Senator Lewis, I think that that's to be determined, and certainly something up for discussion with the General Assembly members. But we do have concerns about the way the fund is currently structured. And while we love our friends at NDCR, there is no oversight of those funds being spent. That's $45 million. And so having accountability to this board would be a good first step. Whether or not they actually administer it through the staff, that could be determined, or it stays in DCR. I don't know. But I think one of the concerns that we had was having that oversight and that similar to the CTB, having some structure in place and recognize that $45 million annual amount from RGGI, we hope that this is just the start. We hope that there are lots of different funds coming in, perhaps from the Army Corps, perhaps from other transportation projects, federal transportation projects, et cetera. But that this would just be the body that would oversee anything as it related to flooding Commonwealth-wide, recognizing that it's not all going to be coastal. To Bob's point, coastal riverine flooding and Danville and Roanoke and Stanton and all sorts of folks around the Commonwealth are experiencing this right now.
Okay. Any other questions? So I have one more. So going back to the disclosure issue. So I'm assuming it really sounds like, I knew you all were having a meeting last week, so it sounds like it was really productive, right?
I think it was great. We had probably Good. 8 or 10 people from the Virginia Association of Realtors there, from Terry Suit to Chip Dix to Susan Gaston to a whole host of other folks. And they are working on some legislation that we were really pleased to hear about and we were able to share with them what the current requirements are as it relates to disclosure with FEMA. And so I think it's certainly good discussions is definitely a great start. Very pleased.
Good. Good to hear. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you so much, Senator.
All right. Next, we have some presentations, tools for fighting the flood, shoreline protection, and addressing erosion. And Matt Campbell, you're up next. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Let me share my screen here. Thank you.
Great.
We have it. Thank you very much for having me here. I was asked to kind of tell our story, and we're a startup company in the coastal resilience space. Our name is Natrix, and we're trying to figure out how we can use the most widely used material on Earth, which is concrete, make it lower cost, more effective, and more sustainable, specifically in our fight for sustainable coastal communities. There's a few techniques that are predominantly used on the coast today. One is cast concrete, the other is rock. And what we've found is that there can be high cost and they lack resilience, especially when you put a hard structure on the coast that is dynamic, and then it can be environmentally damaging. And so in my work of doing this over the past years, I've tried to come up with other ways of attacking this problem. I'm a coastal engineer by training, and this is a project that I did a long time ago in Louisiana, coastal Louisiana. The erosion rate in this area is around 100 feet per year. So massive erosion rates, a lot of communities behind this shoreline, as well as oil and gas and other types of infrastructure. And so our approach that was developed over time was low profile structure that you add a lot of surface area for organisms like oysters to grow in the area and be hydrodynamically stable. So these units would interlock together. They're made out of concrete. And this picture was taken by NOAA 2 days after Hurricane Laura went through this area, and it was a direct hit. And as you can see, the structures that we had in place, which are on the left, they're in place. They didn't move. The shoreline was fairly well intact. And the breakwaters, which were higher profile, the rocks were basically scattered all over the area, and you had damage to the shoreline. And so this was a project that we implemented around 2010. Since then, we've just a recognition that all coastlines are different, all situations are different. How do we not just adapt to the physical environments, but how do we adapt to the changing communities, the changing needs in those communities, and other things that are happening, which are these wicked problems like sea level rise? And so I invented this technology to basically 3D print concrete, where we can create these naturalistic structures that are adaptable, that have surface area where lots of organisms can grow on them, but also have them be stable under these extreme conditions, and then make them fit the site and the logistics using local contractors and other locally available materials. Essentially, the way that this process works is you come up with a design using CAD. So we've worked with AutoCAD and incorporating our design features within that. That then is moved into our printer software, where we can then give instructions on how to create this structure. And we can do this very fast. We've come up with designs in the morning and have full scale structures in the afternoon. And so we don't have molds. We don't have the constraints that you might have with the traditional precast structures and other techniques that are out there. And so I was asked the other day, can you make something that would incorporate dredge material? And yes, we could. We could do that. We can incorporate dredge material into the structure itself, but then also encapsulating the dredge material. And we can modify the habitats to suit the habitat that we're working in. And so there was a group in Hawaii that we were working with where we were accommodating for these certain type of reef fishes so that the overall coral health would be there. And so these are the types of things that we're interested in continuing to incorporate into our solutions. And we're also bringing this to the logistics of it. Again, we're working, we have mobile units that can go to the point of need. We're working with local contractors, and we can design the project, not just for the physical site, but also the logistics. And so this is a project that we did in Louisiana where we were able to compare the cost between a traditional rock structure and our solution. And we were able to cut down on the material at the site by a tenth. We were able to cut down on the permitting because we could accommodate the local environmental conditions and not have to dredge huge channels to get our equipment in there. And then the crew that we needed was much less. And then overall, our carbon footprint was much less because we didn't have to touch as many things logistically. And so this particular project was also tested in Louisiana. They got hit really bad this year, actually, 4 storms in one season. And when we went out for a post-storm assessment, there were oysters growing all over our structures. They were in the place where we placed them, and the marshes were protected. And part of what our solutions are is, again, we have these mobile units that are containerized. We can put them at the point of need. We can work with the local contractors. And so in a lot of these areas that we're working in are rural areas. They're the jobs that we're creating by doing this type of resiliency work. It's generating jobs. There's economic activity that's happening in those locations. And so this is, as we looked at coastal Virginia and the kind of growth that we could anticipate moving into this area, this is kind of our projection. And I tried to make this applicable to the kind of total impact economically we would anticipate of these types of activities. So if we had a local unit there, we would generate jobs to run the machines. There's also additional local contractors we would be working with. So as opposed to rock, where some of this rock is coming in from Georgia even to your area, all the materials are local. We're using local sand, we're using local cement that's generated there, and then local labor, and then all the professional services that are around these types of jobs. You're seeing benefits of those up to 33 million a year by year 5. Just under some of our projections of what we could do in the area. And this is not including the ecological services. By incorporating these natural systems into your overall resiliency solutions, you're creating oyster habitat, which will then generate filtering of the water. So if you have a lot of surface area and lots of organisms, you're going to filter for each individual about 50 gallons per day. So if you add that up, by year 5 and the growth of these structures and implementation of these, that's 543 billion gallons annually. And if you put that in the perspective of what comes into the Chesapeake Bay, 50 billion a day, there's a lot of water that needs to be turned over and filtered, and just the overall health of that. And then not to mention the value of the fisheries that are incorporated in those types of habitats. And there's estimates of 40K benefit, the way that they can figure the overall economic benefit of these, 40K per acre, which if you were putting out lots of this, those would add up. And then there's the tourism aspect of the people that are coming to the area for fisheries or to enjoy the bay. There's large amounts of economic activity around that, which CCA estimates, that's Coastal Conservation Association, 1 billion per year to the tourism industry. And so what do we need to continue to grow in the area? And I think there's a few things that we identified, and from our experience working with folks in Virginia, and that's the permitting. And as you'll hear from some of the other providers, I'm sure, if you're going to do something new, there's a lot of roadblocks. There's a lot of questions about how that's going to perform. There should be some way to incorporate innovation in the space for resilience and not just go back to the old ways of doing things. And so there's organizations in your areas that are working with that. And then innovative financing. There's problems that people that live right on the coast recognize. And are there innovative ways that we can finance these long-term problems, solutions to these longer-term problems? And then also the creation of just a general atmosphere for innovation. And there's been, we've gotten tremendous support from the planning districts and groups like RISE and the Department of Housing and Community Development for ways that we can grow in your area, providing those incentives. And we even recently received a revenue-based loan from the Department of Housing and Community Development and RISE for a mobile unit to put in the area, in the Hampton Roads area, which then could benefit other places along the coast because it is a mobile unit. And so this thanks to them and what you've already been doing, but these are the types of things that we need to grow as a business. And so that's the end of my presentation, but I thank you so much for letting me present and talk to you all. And I've included my contact info on here if anyone needed to reach out for something specific.
Mr. Chair, are you there? Senator Lewis?
I dropped off again. I'm back. Yes, I'm sorry. We're having some issues on this end. All right, that was great. Any questions?
Hey, Matt, this is Chris.
Any questions from?
The only question that I would
There you go.
Have you constructed a test site for this anywhere?
Yes, we have it in Louisiana. We have in Louisiana and in some other places in the Gulf, but we have not in Virginia yet. But we are working on that with some of the planning districts.
So you published some information in terms of the effectiveness?
We haven't published any research on that specifically on these. There has been on some of the previous efforts, like that first slide that I showed. And that there's been work that I've done actually with VIMS on some of that previous work. And there's some of that published in some literature, peer-reviewed literature, and also some books.
I would suggest you also get with Virginia Sea Grant.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Matrix?
Mr. Chairman, this is Keith.
Yep. Hey, Delegate, go.
Thank you, sir. You sparked my interest when you mentioned the dredge spoils. I know with Senator Lewis and I, this is near and dear to our heart. And
right.
Number of roadblocks. Not sure if you're really familiar with what's going on in Virginia with dredging, but we could find some solutions, in placing those dredge spoils, and this could be one that could really help us quite a bit. I'm just curious on how, I guess you've worked in Louisiana with Corps there, but then here we have the Corps, in Virginia and in this region. And from what I understand, they work differently and operate differently when they make these decisions regarding the use of the spoils. I'm just wondering roadblocks or hurdles or how those spoils are actually used.
Yes, sir. Definitely, there's some differences. I think Louisiana, they need more material on just wherever they can get it. And so they're just finding ways to how they can use it beneficially where it's needed most. From what I understand in Virginia, sir, there's just a lack of places to put the material. And so I think that there's definitely ways that you can do that. And also, is the material contaminated? So can you encapsulate any contaminated material where it's not damaging the environment when you place it somewhere else?
Yeah, thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, real quickly, this is Andrea.
Go ahead. Yes. So,
Matt, question. So, the technology that you're using is you're basically using 3D printing, but the substrate would be a mixture of the soils, the sand and concrete. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you'd have to figure out a way to that'd be a lot of these reefs to take care of all those dredging sands that we need to take care of.
Yes, if you were incorporating it directly into it, but you could also make containers that you could then place that into. And then if you were using it to create some other living shoreline types of areas, you could use it to protect the fringe, maybe in areas where the soil would be unstable.
And how are you working with RISE?
So we were one of their award winners for the last resiliency challenge.
You were in the second challenge grant?
Yes.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
Any other questions? All right. Next up, we've got Chris Davis with Ready Reef. Chris?
Okay, I'll get my screen up. Whoa, that's not it. Why didn't I get the one I want? Let's see here. There we go. Again, thanks to the committee for allowing me to present the activities of my company. We're a small company. We're working almost exclusively with residential private property owners. Everybody see that okay?
Chris, we don't see your screen.
What's happening here? Let me close this one and make sure we pull up the right one. Where did it go? Well, I had it earlier. Hold on here. This is terrible.
Does everybody have hard copies? Did anybody? I have one, so.
This is Sean in the clerk's office. I think I can try sharing it from here if you give me just a moment.
I came on a half hour earlier and had it. Anyway, we've been working for about 6 years in the private market on shoreline erosion. To echo what was said before, we're using innovative products, and it's very difficult to do any innovation in Virginia. I don't know why.
Oh, wait, let me back you up then.
Wait a minute, I got it now. How about that?
All right, Chris, it's difficult to do, but you don't know why. I mean, can you flesh that out for us a little bit? Or
well, there's just roadblocks at every little place. I do have some comments. I'll get to that.
Okay.
Basically, we have used oyster reefs as sills. We started out as habitat, but we realized that really the original ecology in Virginia was oysters up they grow up halfway between mean high and mean low, where they meet marsh grass. And essentially in the lower water column, the oyster reefs handle wave energy, and in the upper part, the marsh grasses handle it just fine. So in 1608, we had rising sea levels. We did not have erosion. We had Caribbean clear water, according to Captain John Smith. And of course, we did have oysters filtering water, but what is underestimated is the oysters protecting the shoreline physically from wave energy. So what we do now is we put the oyster reefs in, we back them up with your classic living shorelines at 10-to-1 slopes. But what we've done is incorporate these three products on the steeper slopes that you almost invariably find in association with wave energy. But none of these products have any kind of BMPs distributed, developed. Nobody's studying any of this, even though these products have been around for decades in other places. So I'm going to show you that I love this new law you passed. I have no problems putting in living shorelines in places where people say it's not possible. And, you know, really it's a matter of will. So we just got to get more people doing it. Anyway, I'm going to show you some pictures. Here's a typical problem where there's a stone sill, there's marsh grass, but storm surge and high tides still chew at the land, and there's a septic field back here. So this is Fleximat, just installed in November. This is half revetment, half living shoreline. And I say half living shoreline because it has open spaces between the revetment blocks that you can plant with marsh grass. So it will take wave energy at 18 degrees. So it solves space problems. Now we'll plant this in the spring, but any wave energy coming in now is completely abated by this product at the high storm level surge. There is a little bit of a berm increase here if you can see it. So here's another example in the bottom left where stone sills were put in, but no consideration was given to the shoreline behind it. So we put in Fleximat, we planted it 1 foot on center. In the second year, the plants run through the grid. So this is what it looks like. You can still see some revetment there. It's really the best of both worlds. Here is Envirolock bags. This part here, you have a tree that's going to be killed by the salt water on its roots, undercut bank. There's even a driveway up here that's starting to collapse. These Envirolock bags are like sandbags, but they really support growth. They are structurally sound, and you can plant them. This particular guy did not at this time, but they're self-planting actually. Here's another Fleximat application in the bottom. This was an 11-foot cliff on the York River. You can see with Fleximat, you can cut the bank back and you can fill in and you create a surface that can absorb large waves. Here's a place on the Chesapeake Bay. Its barrier island is gone. So every time there's a high water, sand surges into his yard. We've put in Fleximat. You can't, again, it's hard to see the relief here. And this is planted, but come spring, this will all be green. Here's our oldest Fleximat. It's 2.5 foot of cliff here. These 2 trees were going to be killed. You can see they just throw whatever they can down there. But this is how it solves the space problem. If you were to put in a 10-to-1 slope here, you'd have to go 25 feet out into the water with fill. And with the water getting deeper and deeper, you can never really do it. Or you have to cut back 25 feet in the yard, which is going to eliminate the trees, which is the goal of the project. So within this 9-foot space, we can put in the Fleximat and plant it and still get our oysters contribution at the toe. And, you know, VMRC hasn't decided what to call this. They don't know if it's a living shoreline or not. So there's an example. There's just nobody studying this, nobody interested in sticking their net out and calling this a living shoreline. Here's a typical thing where you have 6 feet of mud bank. It's eroding back. The dock is going to have to be extended. We put in the Envirolock. We put marsh grass between it. Here's the other part of the project, undercut bank. There's a tree that fell over. You can see the root ball and all this erosion behind it. That's Fleximat, and this is the Envirolock after a year with the full growth of the marsh grass. Here's trees. The client wanted to save them, 3 feet in front of them of eroding bank, undercut, typical where you see stuff thrown in. Here's the reef line as sills. We backfill with 1.5 feet of sand. We've planted it. And then we have Fleximat that protects this property up through the flood zone. Here it is 3 months later. This is an example of where we've taken a decaying bulkhead and converting it into a living shoreline. If you go to the VIMS decision module that was developed in 2010, it won't give you a solution for a living shoreline where there's a bulkhead. In fact, there's no plans to update it. And so any new product cannot get into the VIMS decision tree which is used by the wetlands boards all the time. I was in a meeting, wetlands board last Friday, where they authorized a bulkhead where they had marsh grass in front, and available science says that with sea level rise, that marsh grass will be cut off, it will drown, it will die. If they had used a product like Fleximat, the marsh grass will migrate vertically and be a dynamic solution instead of a death sentence for marsh grass in front of revetment or bulkhead. So this particular part of this bulkhead was a boat basin. So we cut the timbers down. We didn't disturb that oil mess that's there at the base. We covered it up and planted it, and now this property drains through this wetland. Out in front of the property, same thing, bulkhead with holes in it, soil coming out behind it, exposed dead men. And this is what it looked like just after we finished the project. Now, a year later, this is completely grassed in, and the homeowner is just tickled pink. So where are we policy-wise? You know, 776 is still not implemented. VMRC has some personnel problems. They haven't written the guidelines yet, and they don't even have the public comment period started yet. So we're at least a year behind on getting any benefit from that. And really, you know, all these things land in front of the Wetlands Board. This is not a place where there's any likelihood of change. I've heard some boards openly ridicule this new law. And, you know, I don't have any problem with it and complying with it, but wetlands boards don't see it. They don't see creative, innovative ways to meet the letter of the law. You mentioned BMPs earlier. I don't know how a BMP gets written with a new product. VDOT has a committee that researches new products and puts it on approval lists, but there's no such equivalent in the marine environment. Anything new, you know, and these products that I'm talking about have been used for decades in other states. So I did want to mention one last thing. This is called a geotube. These are used all over the world. This is a 200-year-old Dutch company. They've saved the Panama Canal. They built Palm Island in Dubai. They're even got product on Waikiki Beach at Honolulu. So this is on Lake Michigan. These are sand-filled bags. You can fill them with dredge material. They can also be used for dewatering dredge material. But you want to put dredge material somewhere. If it's sand, you can put it in the bag. If it's mud, you can put it on land. That dewaters it, and then you can use it as a perimeter for containment for future dredging. I do have a permit that will be, it's coming up in January, so I'll be putting my first geotube bags in high energy environments. Typically, I've been working in medium to low, but this can put you in high energy. You can plant these things. You can put them on a beach. You can stack them up a slope. I think it'll be an excellent tool for building berms and fighting where at the point of flooding in low properties. And it's much more economical compared to large riprap. So basically that's what I have is successful use of materials that are still considered to be too innovative to get any broad publication in Virginia. Maybe that's a brutal way of saying it, but that's the way I feel.
All right, any questions for Chris?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say I hear your frustration and I appreciate your candor. And I think the fact that you've highlighted that we're working with innovation and projects in VDOT, but we're not doing it on this side of things maybe suggest an opportunity for some recognition of these types of projects. In this last example, Delegate Hodges, you've talked about the dredging soils, this geotubes that you have. Is that something where that could be of use in that?
Absolutely. Actually, in Matthews County, there's VIMS is working with this company now. They're dredging a channel and they're going to dredge the material up into these bags onto the land where it will dewater and then create a containment. They've got other projects where the dredge material is sand, which can fill the bags and create and make a jetty. So then the jetty can protect the area that you've dredged so it won't fill back in again.
Brilliant.
So it's not a problem of actually getting permits. It's that in front of a wetlands board, they've never heard of it. And it's just not something that is widespread. You don't have shoreline engineers designing with these things.
And in other states, they don't have wetlands boards, or why is that process easier elsewhere?
I don't work in other states. I know in Maryland, they own the intertidal zone, so the government does make their own decisions. But here, in the private market, you have to work with private homeowners who are going to marine contractors who don't recommend anything innovative. And then in the wetlands process, instead of the homeowner being informed up front what all his options are, he's given an option. Then after much time and money is spent, it's yay or nay in front of a wetlands board. Well, by then it's the wrong time to say no, because money and time have been spent. It should be backwards. Wetlands boards should be consulted up front, not at the final point of decision. It's just a highly flawed process. And then you have, volunteers trying to do the right thing, but they're frustrated because all they can do at that point is rubber stamp. So I really think the entire wetlands process needs to be redesigned. If you want to get more living shorelines, you're going to have to do it. Something has to change, because these boards are either hostile or they only know the same old way. So when a marine contractor gets in front of them and says, we have to do revetment, it's the only thing that'll work, the board will says, well, you're the expert, okay, and they go along with it instead of saying no.
So Mr. Chair, this is Chris.
The teeth in this law is a huge, huge change for these boards. And I just don't see any active embracing. Politically, they got to go to their boards of supervisors. If they're going to be aggressive with this law, they're going to have to get the support politically from the people that appointed them. So it's tremendous training and tremendous support need to be given to these wetlands boards.
Mr. Chair, this is Chris Dunn. I have a comment, and this really is for Mr. Davis, Mr. Campbell, and I guess Mr. Todd that we're going to hear from in just a minute. But for any of these new products, what I would suggest you do is look at the American Society of Testing Materials, ASTM, and get your product certified by ASTM, because if you can do that, then there are organizations like VDOT and DEQ and DCR and all these other ones that if you have that certification, that's what they're going to be looking for.
All these companies have plenty of testing, but
it's not
they're
the
not,
same. It's not
they're
the
not
same
incorporated
thing as
as best management practices.
It's not the same as ASTM. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, all these have ASTM datas.
Okay, well, okay, well, I didn't see it on yours, but okay.
Oh, okay, well.
Any other questions for Chris Davis?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, this is Keith.
Go ahead, Doug.
And it's not necessarily just the materials we're looking at, it's the process and actually what they're doing. So basically, if they haven't seen it work, they're not going to approve it because they don't know anything about it. One thing that I had talked about, I'm not sure if I even introduced legislation on it, but because there would have been a fiscal impact, was to have DCR have a clearinghouse for BMPs, for flooding BMPs. That would really, get folks to be more innovative, to be able to apply to DCR through this clearinghouse. So you'd have people coming out from everywhere, hopefully, with new innovation for resiliency and for flooding. That way you have a government stamp of approval on that. And then our boards would say, hey, this has been approved, boom, it's done. So that's just an idea. It may be a legislation, so I'll talk about legislation. I just thought about it again, but maybe something that we could either entertain as a legislative proposal or in the budget.
All right, great. Anybody else? All right, next up, we've got Philip Todd with Reef Maker Technology. Mr. Todd? Are you on?
Wrong one. There we go. Thank you for your time.
You there? Yep.
Share screen. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
great.
sir.
Thank you. This cover photo shows a reef maker technology at low tide at the Brunswick Anderson site, south of Wilmington, North Carolina, on the Cape Fear River, North Carolina. The technology was used to dissipate wave energy from vessel-generated wakes that were eroding coastal marsh shoreline and washing away artifacts from the pre-Revolutionary War and Civil War periods. The reef maker technology is a power-based wave attenuation system that dissipates wave energy as waves approach from the open water side and flow through the system, producing calm water. Ecodiscs are perched above the substrate and held to the right level by this mechanical support system. The reef maker system consists of a series of concrete discs stacked on top of one another. The image to the left here depicts the image with its legs, which are positioned in such a way to direct the water from the open water side to the pile to calm water. The height of the structure is generally set to 1 foot above ordinary high tide, which is similar to the height of traditional breakwater systems. The structure also provides habitat for marine life. As you can see here in this photo, bait fish here hang out inside the structure between the legs and the pile itself. And we have predator fish hanging out below. We also have sussel life, barnacles and oysters that attach to the structure. Currently, we've developed 2 different sizes for the technology. One is for low energy wave environment, one's for high energy wave environment. The high energy wave environments we've used are square and octagonal shaped and have been set to 20% porosity. Right now, we're in development for a 0% porous structure and one for moderate wave energy environments to be used in other environments such as coral restoration, as well as beneficial dredge use materials, amongst other shoreline protection techniques. And so this illustration here gives you an idea of how the reef maker system works. Wave energy comes in from open water source, is dissipated in 1 of 3 ways. Wave energy comes in and bounces off the structure and goes back out into open water. We also have wave collisions in between the structure here, between these octagonal structures. And the wave energy also comes in, is directed to the pile itself by the legs that I showed you previously. Water wraps around the pile where it speeds up and it's focused and concentrated. And then on the back side of the structure, it opens back up as these legs are pointed to the out here. If there is sediment within the water column, it will fall out of the system. This gives you an idea of the habitat. This structure was installed at the low energy environment in Bogue Sound, North Carolina. This to the left right here shows you the photo of the structure just as it was installed in December 2019. And this photo to the right here is a structure from October 2020. You can see already the spat that is attached to and the structure as we have the growth of the oysters here on this particular structure. We have 9 different ways of why use of reef maker technology. I want to focus on just a couple of these points here. Point number 2, it dissipates wave energy. Based on wave attenuation studies that we're having done right now in wave tanks of the U.S. Corps of Engineers Research Station in Vicksburg, Mississippi, we're seeing wave energy reduction of greater than 60% and up to 84%. We're looking at the 0 and 20% porous structures here. This is comparable to a traditional breakwater structure. Point number 4 about why using the reef maker technology. With the mechanical support system capable of holding up the disc above the substrate, sand can move up and down the shoreline and from open water to the shoreline. This is not possible with a traditional breakwater system. Point number 5 here involve impacts to the environment are substantially minimized with a reef maker system. With the reef maker technology, substrate impacts are limited to the fiberglass pile itself. Each pile affects 0.785 square feet of substrate. A traditional a structure that's 500 feet long using the reef maker system would have approximately 100 piles and impact 78.5 square feet of substrate. The same traditional breakwater structure would have a base of about 50 feet, let's say, impact over 10,000 square feet of substrate. Point number 8 here enables easy adjustments to accommodate for sea level rise, ties into its modular construction, which is item number 7. This accommodation can be planned out in advance by installing a longer pile sticking up over the ecodisc and adding another ecodisc in the future, or by adding a sleeve inside the hollow pile to accommodate the additional disc. The other good thing about the modular construction and adjusting for sea level rise is that no additional environmental permits are required in order to adjust for sea level rise. Whereas to alter a traditional breakwater system to accommodate for sea level rise, when you raise the height of the structure, you also have to add to the base, and this creates more substrate impacts as well as additional environmental permitting. I'll just try to summarize some of the challenges that we faced in the past couple of years in trying to implement the product. From a regulatory standpoint, many environmental regulators do not view the structure as a living shoreline product because it does not fit within the definition of a living shoreline. Regulations have been restrictive in the structure's placement on the shoreline as well. The regulators want to hold the structure to the norms associated with the oyster bag seals and small rock seals, but our structure can be placed further out from the shoreline without the need of any associated sand placement and plantings. Additionally, regulators are not keen on having new technology be tried out. They'd rather someone else be the guinea pig from a regulatory perspective and have it tried out elsewhere to see how it works. Chicken and egg. The regulators want field data on how the structure performs, yet we cannot secure the data unless we're allowed to have the structure installed. We're always looking for grants and funding to test the product, money for demonstration products, and as well as for longer term monitoring on these projects. We're also looking for, at times, funding for lab studies to generate documentation so engineers have numbers to complete equations and have a comfort level with installing the structure. And also education, like the previous gentleman was talking about. Looking at the living shoreline definition for Virginia, I know this was recently updated and it added a last phrase from the past 9 months where you talked about the placement of, excuse me, look at my notes here. When practical, this sentence right here was added recently. When practical, a living shoreline may enhance coastal resiliency and attenuation of wave energy and storm surge. I want to point out where the regulators would have a hard time with the reef maker structure within Virginia's definition of living shoreline. We accomplished everything laid out here in the bottom left-hand side, but the challenge is for us is where it says plants, stone, sand fill, and other structural and organic materials. The conjunction "and" regarding the physical materials is what challenges us. Our product can work without that. But if you look at the definition itself, those items are all required for it to be a living shoreline technology. Some potential solutions: updated the living shoreline definition, add the word "or" there for products like ourselves. They're new products and can fit within that definition and still meet it in other ways. Another suggestion I had was the creating of proving grounds for new technology, where basically funding would be provided to be able to, and as well as an area located as well where we can go and implement projects. This would include monitoring, and when I'm referring to monitoring, it's not just the first year after construction, but look at it years maybe 3 and 5 of the series and see how the environment changes as a result of the product. The very first photo of this presentation was at Brunswick Fort Anderson, and here we're seeing the shoreline being rebuilt over time and naturally accrete with the shoreline, which ties into the fact that we don't need those other materials to be a successful product. And that's all that I had right there. Thank you so much for your time today, and let me present this information to you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Todd. Do we have any questions about this presentation? Okay. All right. Well, oh.
Madam Chair, hey, this is Keith. No question, just a comment for these 3 gentlemen and for everyone. Like to thank them for being here. I felt it was necessary really to have some newer technologies presented before us. You know, we always talk about living shorelines, we talk about hardened structures, but we need to talk about the living shorelines and the newer technologies and the challenges that we're facing in the Commonwealth of using these technologies through our regulations and through our statutes. Somehow we need to find a way to embrace new technology to help with resiliency, and hopefully we had some good discussion today, and it will give us all some ideas on how we can possibly make some changes in Virginia to start to embrace newer technology.
Absolutely. Thank you, Delegate Hodges. I think someone else had a question or a comment. Chris Stone, Mr. Stone, was that you?
Nope, wasn't me.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I got everybody.
I would offer any of those individuals that want to look into getting their products certified for construction. If they want to reach out to me, I'll put them in touch with the right people.
Sounds good.
And Delegate Converse Fowler, I would also support and agree with Delegate Hodges' comments about innovation, and really this is a great opportunity. I appreciate y'all coming to the table today. Maybe if we had a Commonwealth Flood Board, we could have an innovation subcommittee on it. Just putting it out there.
Thank you, Councilwoman McClellan. All right, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead to the next order of business. The chair, Senator Lewis, had to leave early, so we have one more bit of business under additional business, legislative proposals, and also kind of referencing the future meeting in January. So real quick, we have a clerk on, right? Sorry, I'm trying.
This is Sean with the Senate Clerk's office.
Oh, yeah. Did we have any official legislative proposals or anything submitted by any of the members to go over today?
Not that I saw, Madam Vice Chair.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So we wanted to first of all, I think January 12th or 13th, I think they'll probably be sending something around in reference to which day is preferred about that meeting. I'm not sure. I will get with the chair about that. And I guess we wanted to talk more about legislative proposals and open it up to the members if there are going to be any legislative proposals that they want to talk about. So is there anyone who wanted to?
Yeah, Madam Vice Chair.
Yeah, Delegate Key.
Just on the schedule for the next meeting, January 13th is when we convene. Is there any opportunity that we could actually have a meeting on that same day? My guess is it'll be pretty hectic that day.
Yes, I will convey that to Senator Lewis. I'm not sure if the intent was before that day, we've done in the past, where we've done it before session, but potentially. So I will point that out and bring it up that we probably need to do a different day. So I will let him know that.
Sure.
Did anybody have any legislative proposals that they would like to talk about?
Delegate Converse Fowler, do you have any legislation?
I wanted to give everyone an opportunity. I could probably go on and on about a couple bills I will be working on, been working on. So I'll go ahead and take that privilege. So I am working on the smart scale funding transportation, the adding resiliency to the definition with smart scale with the funding. So we've been working on that. I know Senator Lewis is working on that, and I'm trying to support his efforts in the House side. And disclosure, that's the big one I've carried for a few years. On real estate disclosure, being in real estate, being a real estate broker, and being in an area that has a lot of issues with flooding. One of the biggest issues is disclosing the flood zones. And I know that the HRPDC has worked a little bit and gone a little farther and worked on the disclosure of actual flooding. So, there's a couple levels to this. Right now we do have where, there's a beware where you have to go figure out for yourself what your flood zone is. And I want to make that an affirmative disclosure, as do most in the real estate industry. We want to make sure people know upfront what they're getting into when they're buying or when they're renting. So sometimes we don't always talk about the people renting property, and that they should know what flood zone they're in when renting, so that they can adequately buy proper insurance, make that decision based on what could happen. If you were to find out that you could flood, would you still rent there? Would you buy that? Would you buy additional insurance, because that is not included in rental insurance? Just things like that. So I think proper disclosure in the beginning will help in the housing industry. And that's something that I've carried the last couple of years, and we've made a little progress on, but not enough. We do need to have a more affirmative disclosure. So I will be presenting that at the next meeting, making sure we'll have our draft back, and we'll be able to talk about it more. So Councilman McQuillan, I think those are the two, since we're limited in bills this year, those are the two that I'll be working on for sure. We're still, working on the bill number and who's doing what, and that way we don't duplicate efforts. So there could be some more. We've got a couple things drafting, but we just want to make sure that we, hit the most important ones. So.
That's great. We had a conversation, as I mentioned, with the realtors, and there was some confusion as to how information, flood claim information, is made available. And so we forwarded on. We reached out to FEMA and just for the purposes of this group, it probably would be helpful to understand that the only so previous flood claim disclosure is only provided to current owners or the sellers of the property. That can't be disclosed by our floodplain managers, and the insurance companies, as a third-party arbiter of information, they don't have access to that information either. So it's a pretty simple form that has to be filled out and is returned in 7 to 10 days from FEMA, and it provides all previous flood claims to the property owner, or to I think the renter as well. So that information is available, and if that information were disclosed and required to be disclosed, for the communities that participate in the community rating system, CRS, as Norfolk does, and several others, we could reduce our flood insurance costs by as much as 15% additional reduction by providing that level of disclosure. That's a real dollar value to my constituents. And so in addition to being informed about that, which I think they should be, it's also a financial implication, a positive financial implication for all flood policy holders in a special flood hazard zone who participate in the CRS program.
If I could follow up and ask a question, is there any issues that have come up when you all were researching this that had to do with federal versus the state, in terms of the state requiring it and the federal providing it?
No, there are other states that have that requirement, but it has to come from FEMA, and it can't come from the state. It has to come from the individual property owner, the seller. Okay, so, and if they're not, if it couldn't be a potential buyer, it couldn't be someone under contract. You're saying it basically has to be somebody who already owns the property, and then the onus would be on the property owner, the seller, or the landlord to let them to disclose it. There's just a form that you fill out. It has to be notarized. It's sent to FEMA, and they provide all of the information.
And just another follow-up, did the realtors indicate any issue with the follow-through and the time that it would take to do that in advance?
The impression that I got, and this is mine, so they should probably speak on their own behalf. Their concern is they want to protect their members and they want to mitigate any problems of their membership. So they don't want the realtors themselves to be responsible for that information. Rather, they were looking at the idea of omission by a seller and trying to tease out what that means, a material omission, and how this might be incorporated as part of that. But there was some confusion as how that information is provided by FEMA. And so we tried to clarify that. And I don't think that that's readily known. It's certainly not by my constituents. And just as a point of clarification, one of the issues is we have constituents who purchase properties. They know they're in a flood zone. They understand that there's a risk of flooding. What they don't know is the previous flood claims. And if you have 4 flood claims of $5,000 or more, you go into what's called a severe repetitive loss category. So rather than just getting flood insurance, which is also always already expensive, if you have one additional flood after you've purchased the property, you could go into a flood insurance policy that would go from, let's say, $3,200 to $8,700. So that sort of information is what we're trying to get at.
Could you send me that form? I would like to request it and just go through the motions and see how that works. That way, you have that information. Delegate Hodges, you had unmuted. Did you have a?
Yes, I have a couple of bills, I think. First, I've talked about flooded septic systems, which are a tremendous problem. Not only are they an environmental nightmare, but it's potentially a major public health crisis. And just in Gloucester County, we have 600 systems that are flooded just on sunny day flooding. So if the sun is out, nice high tide, roads are covered, septic systems are covered. Problem is many of these are not only in flooded areas, they're in the RMA and they're in the RPA, and which makes it very difficult to possibly come up with some solutions. One thing we are looking at is either a pilot of some type that would bring VDH and DEQ together to look at getting these systems actually out of the ground and up in the air, out of harm's way for flooding. This can be done. The technology is out there. They can be built. The matter is permitting can be a headache, and permitting can be a tremendous problem, possibly. So we want to look at.
Could I ask why they're flooding? Is it the water table? What is it? Is there a reason that we've identified? I'm just curious.
Why are they flooding? Septic. I mean, these are people's yards.
Mm-hmm.
High tide comes up, come and visit us. I mean, we're the epicenter of the flooding in Matthews County and down in Guinea and Gloucester. So on a high tide, it floods.
So are they still installing them? Have the installations changed since?
No, these are septic systems that are already in the ground.
Okay. Okay.
So these are septic systems that aren't working properly because they're flooding. Septic systems and water do not mix well. If you know how a septic system works and how a septic system drains, a traditional system is not going to work when it's flooded. And when you look at the number of systems that are out there that have failed, and even the health department will admit they don't even know where all of these systems are. So it can be not only an environmental but a public health crisis as well. So we need to get these out of harm's way, out of the ground and up in the air. So we're going to try to overcome some of those regulatory challenges, just like they talked about. And the last 3 presenters talked about the challenges of permitting and getting things through. We need new innovation and new technology, and this can be done. But so we're going to try to create something to get this done. We need to look at it, study it, get our agencies to look at it and study it again, so they know what they can permit, because they can't permit something if they don't know anything about it.
Okay.
So try to find a way to embrace that. Yeah, it's a big problem, and not only that, but just with the effluent. Just to give you something, if we were 100% compliant with the Chesapeake Bay Act, just within our region, we have nowhere to put all of the stuff. Nowhere even to take it. It's a mess out here. Septic systems are a mess, and they are flooding, and causing a lot of headaches for property owners. It will help with as a realtor, it's going to help your real estate values as well if we can do this. So that's probably the biggest one. We do need to find some ways to look at, the BMPs, possibly a BMP clearinghouse as well for newer technologies. Then I'm also looking at a stormwater BMP sub-fund because in many cases, living shorelines don't necessarily work. We want to embrace living shorelines, but again, the stormwater is actually the problem, and we need to address it. And even though water's coming up, water's going down, we need to address it both ways. So may look at doing that.
Well, yeah, that's definitely one I think I would be interested in, considering Virginia Beach has over 2,000 stormwater maintenance facilities. So very interesting. Are these going to be in front of us at the next meeting? I think we're going to be kind of voting on these to support them. Is this going to be?
We usually, in the past, we haven't voted to support individual legislation as a body. We've talked about them unless we take one individual bill and want it to move forward, but we've never embraced the, for or against as legislators. I mean, to embrace it, I don't think.
Okay. So will we have a draft to look at before the next meeting, though?
But yeah, we should.
Okay.
Hopefully, legislative services gets them back. Okay.
Thank you, Delegate Hodges. Was there any other legislative?
Madam Chair.
Delegate Keem.
Well, not my own legislation, but just to add a little bit to what the Delegate Hodges said. My experience on this subcommittee so far has been that we discuss issues, we have presentations like the excellent presentations that we heard today. And there are times when the entire committee feels that something is so ripe and so important that we should put the weight of the subcommittee behind it. So, for example, having the chief resiliency officer or something like that, where we all agree and there's consensus. In that case, we would adopt or endorse the concept, and then we'd all get behind that bill. Other times, members will just individually share what they're working on, and just as a heads up for all of us to know what's going on. And I think the way that we express our interest and or potential support for a measure is not necessarily by voting on it in this subcommittee, but by signing on as co-sponsors. So if there's a bill where you have all of the members in the House and Senate of this subcommittee all signing on to one bill, then regardless of who introduces it, it sends a signal that this is a product that we all support, as opposed to something where we go up and say this is a work product of the committee or subcommittee. So I think that's been the practice, and I assume that will be the practice going forward for this coming session.
Okay, great. So we'll definitely bring drafts to the table on my end for the bills that we're drafting. And I just want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on potential additional legislative proposals?
Delegate Hodges, Madam Vice Chair.
Councilwoman McClellan?
I have a question from the Peanut Gallery who's excited about your septic tanks. So nothing like a little septic tank discussion for the holidays to get you in the spirit. Question was, would these septic tanks be pumped out by a truck then? How would that work if they were elevated?
Yeah, sure. They would be elevated and out of harm's way, so they would need to be pumped out, which septic systems are pumped now.
Right.
So of course, the effluent's out of the ground, so they would have to be by a truck, just like any other septic system.
I need to come visit in after the holidays.
Well, we need to get one built. That's the goal, is to get one built, and start to study this and to really look at it. And that's the goal, and to look at the permitting process. And
then Chris Stone can help it get certified through ASTM.
I did have a comment for Delegate Hodges. And this really is a critical issue. You're exactly right. But if you ever go to Chincoteague, and I don't know if you've been to Chincoteague or not, but almost all the residential systems are above grade. And somehow they've gotten them permitted through DEQ. I don't know how they did it, but there are examples out there that have been built.
Thank you. We'll take a look at it.
Okay. All right. So we have some agenda items that will be on there for the next meeting. I will get with Senator Lewis, and if there is anything else, I guess there's not. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Christmas. Thank you.